Hey there. This lesson begins Section 3, Document Features. In this lesson, we will learn about tables. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to insert, edit, style, and format tables in Word documents. Now, a table is basically like a mini spreadsheet. Now, it doesn't do calculations, but the concept is the same with rows and columns. As we remember, columns are down, rows are across. So you would say this is a 3 column by 5 row or 3x5 table. The same document we've been working with in previous lessons has been pulled up, and I have added a table comparing hosting providers. Now, the text of the article is out of date, so if you were to glance at the article, you'll notice that the article doesn't match the table, but that's not relevant for this discussion. These are 4 current web hosts and their prices. And let's make a change here. My dollar sign's in the wrong place. So these are 4 current web hosts: 1&1 Internet, DreamHost.easy, and AwardSpace. And these are the prices they charge for web hosting if you agree to a 3-year commitment. Now, this table has been styled using a table style from the Table Styles gallery. Now notice, when I have a table selected, I have a contextual ribbon button, 2 of them in fact, design and layout. There are a lot of options with tables. Tables is, I guess you consider, a core feature of Word. So you see, here's our design options and here's our layout options. So lots of options with tables. Now, various items that will demand focus because they are most likely tested on the certification exam. Number 1 is this convert to text button. On your exam, you might be presented with a table and be asked to convert it back to text. Basically undo the table but still have the data in a readable format. So with the table selected on the layout tab, if we click convert to text, we'll get some options. Do we want to convert it with paragraph marks, tabs, commas, or some other delimiter? Now, the default is tabs, and more than likely that's what you would use because that makes the most sense. So if I hit OK, this table goes away and now it becomes tabbed text, as you see here. Now, of course, when you take away the table, you also take away the table style. You can't. Now, I could restyle this text to look like a table. I could put a border around it. I could color the text, put a shading in. But if I was going to do all that, I might as well just have kept the table. So anyway, show you that again. So layout, convert to text, we hit OK. Our table is now gone, and we have simply tabbed text with the tabs preset to the way it would appear if we still had a table. Now, unlike a table, if I were to keep typing in here and keep typing, notice how the 50G starts spacing over. That would not happen in a table. Let me go back. Now if I start typing all these G's in a table, you'll notice the cell simply expands to accommodate. And then the cell gets wider, as wide as it can, based on the other text in the table. And then we simply get more rows, and more rows. Or, excuse me, the cell simply gets bigger and bigger. So that's the advantage of a table over tabbed text. So in the Table Styles gallery, we have all these different styles. You'll notice again, you get a tooltip when you point to them. If you're asked to style a table, just like our other style options on the test, you will be given the name of the style it wants you to apply to the table. And as you see here, all of them are labeled. Alright. The other thing you might be asked to do is actually the opposite of what we just did. So I'm going to undo this table. You might be asked to take text like this and actually put it in a table. So for that, we're on the Insert tab. We don't have the contextual menu tabs, obviously, because we don't have a table. But on the Insert tab, we have this button called Table. Now, if I just click a table, it'll drop down and give me some options. I can insert a table here by just drawing the number of boxes I want for columns and rows. That option is grayed out because I have something selected. But I also have this option called Convert Text to Table. If I click this, now it's going to ask me how many columns do I want. The number of rows is grayed out and it's selected based on the data. We can have a column width of auto. We can actually specify the width, or we can fix the width to the contents, which I'm going to do here. And how is our text delimited? It's by tabs. So there's our table. Back to our table. Now I can then, notice I have my contextual menus back, I can then restyle my table the way I had it styled before. Now if I want the table to take up the entire space here, simply drag it out, and then I can adjust where I want the space to be. Now a new feature in 2013 you just saw is I can actually add a column by clicking the plus right here, and we'll say PHP, and all of these offer PHP hosting. Before 2012 I actually had to go up to either had to go to the contextual menu or the ribbon to create a new column. I simply just couldn't click here, but that's a new feature in 2013. I can now just click the plus and create a column, or out here I can click the plus and I can create a new row, and we'll say other web host if we were to keep that, and we can input the data. So I'm going to get rid of that. So there we have it. Over here we have options. Do I have a header row? Yes or no. If I do, notice the header row is colored differently. And I can also have a first column. Notice how the first column, if I have first column and header, it's colored differently. Also, this data is treated differently, as we'll see in a moment. I can have a last column, which would be the same thing over here. I can have a total row at the bottom, and I can have banded rows or banded columns. Notice if I turn off banded, all the text not in the first row or first column appears the same color. By turning on banded, notice that the shade of the color, shade of green I'm using here, changes every other row to make the data easier to read. Typically banded rows is the option you would use. Now we have this option called total row, which for this data is not really relevant, but I could turn it on here. And now notice down here I have spaces I can type. So if I were to go over here, go to layout and click formula, I can add up what's above. Now this won't, obviously that doesn't make a lot of sense in this setting, but just to give you an idea of what it does. I can also do a count, so formula can do a count. So if I were to say equals count above, I've got five data points there, the heading and then the 4. Again, obviously this table isn't really suited for totals, but just to show you how it's done. The formulas actually work very much like they do in Excel, except instead of cell references, we have references in relation to the table. Some above, some below, some left, some right. Or I have various functions here that I can use. If you've used Excel, this will be very, very familiar to you. The only difference will be instead of using cell references, we're using words to describe where in the table we want to compute the data. So I'm going to go back here, back to design, turn this total row off. Then I'm going to highlight this row and I'm going to press delete on my keyboard. which, as you notice, deletes the data but does not delete the row. If I want to delete the row, I highlight it again, have to right click and go to delete cells, and it'll ask me how I want to move my cells. Typically the default's fine, but here I just want to say delete entire row, and now as you see, the row is gone. So if I delete data using the delete key on my keyboard, I delete the data out. I do not remove the column or row. For example, if I highlight this entire row here and press delete, notice the data went away, the column shrank because there's no data, but the column is still there. The column did not leave us. Okay, so I'm going to switch to another document here. This is a scheduling grid for a tournament that was run back in March. As you see here, we still have tables. This time we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we have a 5 by 12, 5 column, 12 row table here. We have another smaller table down here, and the data simply repeats on each page because each one of these was for a particular gym. So I've styled the data again in this exercise, or in this, and for this table I've styled the data again using grid table 1 light style. Now what I want to show you in this example is I want to show you how to adjust the columns and the cells rather to allow the input of more data. This is typically going to be printed and written on. So if I go down here and just create a table, let's go down here to the very bottom here and just create what I had before, which is a 5 by 12 table. So we go to insert table, 5 by 12. Notice, and I'm going to copy the headers here. Notice not a lot of space to write in. So if I could come up here and copy these times, now to paste in a table I can either select a cell or highlight all the cells and press paste. If the data matches, as you noticed, from table to table, it will go into the table. Now if I were to do this, paste down here with text, I were to just paste it as text into here and then paste it in a table, results sometimes can vary. Notice if I just highlight one and paste it, it pastes it all in the same cell, which is not the desired effect, not what I wanted. But if I highlight all the cells and then paste, as long as the number of cells highlighted match the data, we will have the correct result. So that's something to note. When going from text to table, I must highlight the exact number of rows for the number of data I have for it to paste. Now let me create some more rows here. What will happen is if I highlight this, then come all the way down here and highlight more rows, the data will simply repeat. So after 8:40, notice we go back to 9 o'clock because we're back at the top of our data and we had more rows selected than the amount of data. If we have less, if I just select like 4 rows here, 5 rows, I get that much data from the list. But if I just select 1 row, the data will all go together in that one cell, which is probably, I would venture to say, most of the time is not the desired behavior, not the expected result that I wanted. Alright, let me get rid of these extra rows. I can go up here to layout, click delete rows, and I just deleted my entire table, ladies and gentlemen. Not what I wanted to do. Let's try that again. Let's click delete. Going to delete cells, and we will delete the entire row, and there we go. Alright, let's go back to our table here, and we will see that we have more space in these cells than we had down here. Let's do this. Let me move this table up so we can see them together on one page to avoid the scrolling. So I'm going to get rid of this. Now notice if I select, remember I said if you hit delete, it doesn't get rid of the table. However, if I select non-table data in addition to the table and press delete, the table will go away. Just something to note. If I have other data not in a table selected and the table and press delete, the table will be deleted, not just the data being cleared. Alright, so here's our two different tables. One is styled, one is not. One is also formatted for more appropriate sizing so I can actually write data. If I gave this sheet printed out and gave it to someone, the bottom table would be incredibly hard to write in. There's just not enough space to write a name of a team or an official's name in this box. So when I select a table, you'll notice in the upper left hand corner there's a box that appears right here. If I click this, selects the entire table. I can then right click and go to table properties. I have row and column widths that I can select. Notice here I have not specified a row height, but I have specified a preferred width. I want these columns to be a certain length. So let me go back and just highlight this data here. We'll go back to table properties and we will see that our column width is preferred. Our row width we specified now at 0.33, so one third, a little over 1/3 of an inch. So row height must be at least that. Now it can be larger, but it must be at least that. Now if I hit exactly, if I try to make it bigger, it'll jump back to what I put. So we'll specify the height at 0.33, and notice that gives me this extra space. So if I come down here to my second table, highlight these cells, go to table properties, we will come over here, we will specify a height of 0.33, and we now have our bottom table. It went on to 2 pages, but we can still see the effects here in the first cells. We now have our bottom table with more space like we had in the top. Now notice every cell doesn't have to have a width or a height that is equal. Notice our header row is not bigger, nor do we need it to be because we're not going to write in it. So it's the row width or row height here is different than the cells here. Now if I come over here to table properties, even though I didn't select this data over here, it wouldn't work if the whole row didn't have the same height. So if any cell in the row has a specific height, every cell in the row has the same height. But it's row by row. I could come down here for 510, for example, and turn off row height, and 510 will get smaller, but my other rows are unaffected, just like my header row. Now, table on 2 pages actually presents us with an opportunity to show another feature, which is repeat header. So if I come over here to layout, I can say I have an option here. I have an option repeat header row. So if I click in the header row and click this, notice down here on page 2 now, the header row repeats for the new page. So if I have a table that goes to multiple pages, I can turn this on and it will repeat the header. So if I had multiple pages, when I go to a new page, I don't lose what my headings are and don't have to flip back and forth. Now, you've probably figured out already that I said earlier that these options are important. Having header row checked enables this option to work. Without a header row, obviously we couldn't repeat header rows because we wouldn't know what the header row was. So if I turn this off, turn off header row, and come back over here, I still have repeat header row selected, and it still does it because even though I have it turned off, the style, it still realizes it's a header. But without header row checked, that feature will not always work as intended. So if we have a header, we want to have header row checked. So let me go over here and let me turn it back on. There, oops, wrong button. Let me turn it back on. There we go. Now another thing I can do with the table is I can sort. I can sort tables pretty easily. So let me flip back here to my other document, and I can sort this table. Now, I'm going to select the table, select the entire table here, and not the data below it, because that'll make that option hard to use. And we're going to click sort. Now, what do I want to sort on? Again, my data has a header. If it has a header, sort by will actually have the header name listed. So we'll sort by cost per month. Now, I really can't sort this because I don't have all numeric data. I don't have all numeric data, so it's going to be hard to sort. So we'll go back here and sort hosting provider, and we'll sort it ascending. So now our data has been sorted based on alphabetical order. Now, if I were to add a hosting provider here, and we'll call this bhost, which really doesn't exist, but I just want to illustrate something. Now I type in bhost. Now notice my data doesn't automatically resort itself. I added a new row to the table. If I want to sort, I must click the sort option again. If I just hit enter, click the box, hit enter, it'll use the same sort I had before. Now notice my data is sorted. bhost is where it should be above .easy and DreamHost. I can also do text direction, so I can turn my table this away if I wanted to, which could in some cases make it easier to read. I can turn it that way or back here. Now notice when I started turning my data around with text direction, I greatly increased the size of my table. So I'm going to undo that back to the way it was. Now on our data over here, let's take a look. Would text direction help us out? Now it gives us, as you see, much more space. Gives us a lot more space, but it really doesn't make practical sense. Now notice here it's made the rows much bigger. If I were to go here, properties, we notice our row height is now 7.9. We had it at 0.33. So let me undo this, back to where we were. And now we're back to our row height of 0.33. Now I showed you how to change the row height with table properties and the column with the table properties. We can also do it right here on the cell size category on the ribbon. And if I click here, I get the same dialog box I showed you before with table properties. So there's multiple ways to do everything. Remember, on the test, the greatest thing is it doesn't matter how it gets done as long as it's done correctly, except for the rare case where it specifies an exact method of doing something in the instructions. To insert columns and rows, we've talked about that. We can also use these buttons here on the layout tab, or I can click there and I can get an insert cells button here. Now, when I have data in a cell, we have more alignment options than we do for just text. So let's see, we'll call this two teams played, Phoenix Rudd, Phoenix Carter. The default is top left. We can put it in the middle. We can put it, oops, did not mean to click that. We can put it in the right, bottom. So we have top, middle, and right, or top, center, and right for each area. So we have top, center, right, or excuse me, left, center, right for top, left, center, right for middle, and left, center, right for bottom. So if I were to center all my data, now notice it puts in the exact middle of the cell. So that is alignment options. We can also specify margins if we wanted to space our data out. We can auto fit our data, can auto fit our contents. Now notice it changed everything to auto fit my contents, which I did not want to do in this case, but I could if I have lots long text and wanted to fix it where the text wasn't on multiple rows. I could auto fit my data. I can also merge cells, and split the table. So for example, if I had multiple cells here that were for one game, which they are, but I didn't want the lines. I could merge this and make this one big cell. So now 4 cells is 1. If you're in Excel, merge and center, exact same idea. Merges the cells into 1. I can also create what's called a nested table by splitting the cells and entering a table within the table. Now notice I have 2 cells in this 1 cell, so that is a nested table. Can also split the table. Notice now I have text, a line of text in between my header row and the first row of the table. If I wanted to for some reason put in extra data not pertaining to the table, I can split the table. The most common options, however, you will use and be tested on is these table styles. The border over here. The border is simply the border around the table and in between cells. And then you will be most likely tested on alignment, convert to text, or inserting a table from text. And then you might be asked to do a formula, and will more than likely be asked to sort and to specify a height and width. So there's a basic discussion of tables. If you look in supplementary materials, there will be some practice exercises for you dealing with tables.